The cassette tape sat on the wooden table between them, small and ordinary, like it wasn't carrying the weight of the next 3 years. Jackson Browne looked at it but didn't reach for it. The room was dim, late afternoon light coming through the studio blinds in stripes. Outside, Los Angeles was loud and indifferent. Inside, the air felt too still, the kind of stillness that makes you aware of your own breathing, of the seconds passing, of the fact that what happens next might matter more than you want it to. The songwriter across from him was smiling, but it was the kind of smile that holds its breath. He'd been talking for 5 minutes about the demo, about the hook, about how it was written with Jackson in mind, how the melody came to him in the middle of the night, how he just knew, that this was the one. The melody was sharp and immediate. The chorus was the kind of thing people sing in their cars without realizing they've started, the kind of thing that gets under your skin and stays there. Jackson knew what this was. He'd been in enough rooms like this to recognize the shape of an offer that wasn't really an offer. It was an expectation, a door opening, a test, the kind of moment where saying no felt like walking backward into the dark. He pressed play. The song came through the small speaker, tinny and bright. It had energy, it had clarity. It moved fast, built quickly, and didn't apologize for wanting to be heard. The verses were tight, the bridge soared, and the chorus hit exactly where it needed to. It was the kind of song that could live on the radio for a year, maybe longer. The kind of song that could change things, change careers, change how people saw you, change how you saw yourself. Jackson listened all the way through without speaking. His face didn't move. His hand stayed still on the table. When the song ended, the silence felt heavier than the music had. The songwriter leaned forward, elbows on his knees, eyes bright with something between hope and desperation. "It's yours if you want it." Jackson didn't answer right away. He looked at the cassette again, then out the window. Somewhere in the city, someone was cutting a record that would sell nothing. Someone else was writing a song no one would hear. Someone was playing to an empty room, believing it mattered. And here, in this studio, in this moment, he was being handed something people spend their whole lives chasing, something rare, something real. He should have felt lucky. Instead, he felt tired. The thing about Jackson Browne in 1977 was that he'd already said yes to a lot of things. He'd said yes to touring until his voice went hoarse and his hands cramped on the guitar. He'd said yes to studios and schedules and managers who called at 3 a.m. with ideas that couldn't wait. He'd said yes to expectations, to compromises, to songs that weren't quite finished but had to be because the deadline was yesterday and the label was getting nervous. He'd built a career on songs that took their time, that asked questions instead of answering them, that lived in the spaces between certainty and doubt. Songs about loneliness and hope and the way love feels when it's ending. Songs that didn't try to fix anything, just tried to be honest about how broken things were. People loved him for that. They loved the vulnerability, the refusal to pretend, the way his music felt like a conversation with someone who understood. But love doesn't pay for tours, and tours don't keep going unless the rooms stay full. And the rooms don't stay full unless the songs keep coming, keep connecting, keep giving people a reason to show up. His last album had done well, but not well enough to stop the questions. The label wanted something faster. Radio wanted something easier. His manager wanted him to stop overthinking, stop second-guessing, stop acting like every song was a moral decision. And now, here was a song that could do all of that. A song that could make everyone stop asking. A song that could prove he still had it, whatever it was. A song that could fill rooms and climb charts and remind people why they'd loved him in the first place. The songwriter was still watching him, waiting. His hands were clasped together, knuckles white. His name didn't matter as much as his hope did. He'd written something he believed in, and he'd brought it to someone he respected. That meant something. It meant he thought Jackson could make it bigger, better, truer. It meant he trusted him with something fragile. But Jackson wasn't sure he could. He wasn't sure the song needed him at all. "It's good," Jackson said finally. His voice was quiet, careful, like he was trying not to break something. "It's really good." The songwriter exhaled, relief starting to show in his shoulders in the way he sat back just slightly. "But it's not mine." The relief stopped, froze, turned into something else. Jackson didn't explain. He didn't say it was too commercial or too polished or too far from what he was trying to do. He didn't say he was afraid of what it would mean to sing something that felt like it belonged to someone else. He didn't say that success could sometimes feel like betrayal if it came from the wrong place, if it made you into someone you didn't recognize. He just said no. The songwriter nodded slowly, like he'd heard something he didn't want to understand, like he was trying to process a language he'd never learned. He picked up the cassette, slipped it back into his bag, and stood. He didn't argue. He didn't ask why. He didn't try to convince Jackson he was wrong. He just left. The door closed softly behind him, and the room felt even dimmer than before. Jackson stayed in the studio after he was gone. He sat with the silence and the decision and the faint feeling that he'd just walked away from something important, something that might not come again. The sun was setting outside, painting the walls orange and gold, and he watched the light fade without moving. He wasn't wrong about what he'd done, but that didn't mean it felt right. 3 months later, the song showed up on the radio. Someone else had said yes. Jackson heard it for the first time in his car, driving through the same Los Angeles streets, under the same indifferent sky. He was heading home from another studio session, tired and hungry, and thinking about nothing in particular. And then the DJ's voice cut in, bright and enthusiastic, saying, "Here's a new one that's been climbing fast," and the song started. The voice was different, brighter, younger, hungrier. The energy was sharper, the production was bigger, louder, built to fill arenas and parking lots and living rooms. The guitars were crisper, the drums hit harder. Everything about it was designed to grab attention and not let go. And it worked. Jackson pulled over. He didn't mean to. He just found himself on the side of the road, engine idling, hands on the wheel, listening. The song climbed and soared and landed exactly where it was supposed to. The chorus came in like a wave, inevitable and overwhelming, and Jackson could hear it. He could hear what it was doing. He could hear people in their cars singing along. He could hear it at parties, at weddings, on beaches, and in bars. He could hear it becoming part of people's lives. He sat there until the song ended, until the DJ came back laughing, saying something about how that one was going to be huge, until the next song started and broke the spell. Then he put the car back in gear and drove home in silence. The song climbed the charts fast, faster than anyone expected. It went from regional airplay to national in 2 weeks. It cracked the top 40 in a month. By 6 weeks, it was top 10. And it stayed there. It became the kind of thing people requested at parties, sang at weddings, remembered years later when they were trying to explain what a certain summer felt like. It became a hit. Not just a song, a moment, a touchstone, the thing that defined an artist's career and gave them a platform they'd never had before. The artist who recorded it became famous because of it. Not entirely, but enough. Enough that when people said their name, they thought of that song first. Enough that doors opened. Enough that their next album was anticipated instead of ignored. Enough that they went from playing clubs to playing theaters to playing arenas. All because of a song Jackson Browne had turned down. People started asking him about it. Not directly, not at first, but in interviews and passing conversations and the careful way industry people have of bringing up things without bringing them up. "Did you hear that new song? Sounds like something you might have done. Bet your label wishes you'd recorded that one." Jackson didn't tell them he'd been offered at first. That wasn't the kind of thing you said out loud. It sounded like bitterness, or pride, or regret dressed up as principle. It sounded like you were trying to take credit for someone else's success, or diminish it, or claim you could have done it better. So he just smiled and said, "It's a great song, they did a great job with it," and people nodded and moved on. But the question stayed with him. What if he had said yes? It wasn't a simple question. It branched and split and grew into a dozen other questions, each one harder than the last. Would the song have been bigger with him? Would it have been smaller? Would his version have connected the same way, or would it have felt like he was trying too hard, reaching for something that wasn't his? Would his career have shifted? Would he have spent the next 5 years chasing that sound, trying to recapture that moment, becoming someone he didn't recognize? Would he have lost the people who loved him for being honest and gained people who just wanted the next hit? Or would it have just been another song on another album, good but not great, a single that charted and faded and left him wondering what all the fuss was about? He didn't know. And the not knowing was the hardest part. Because when you say no to something, you don't just lose what it could have been. You lose the certainty. You lose the ability to compare. You lose the parallel universe where you made the other choice and got to see how it turned out. All you have left is the hope that staying true to yourself matters more than being heard. Jackson kept writing. He kept recording. He kept making albums that took their time, that refused to hurry, that lived in the uncomfortable spaces where doubt and hope overlapped. He wrote about love and loss and the long, slow work of trying to be a better person. He wrote about mistakes and regrets and the things you can't take back. He wrote about beauty and pain and the way they're often the same thing. Some of the albums did well, some of them didn't. Critics liked some and dismissed others. Fans stayed loyal, but the rooms got smaller. Radio played him less. The label got more nervous. But none of his songs sounded like that song. And slowly, quietly, that started to feel like the point. The thing about integrity is that it doesn't announce itself. It doesn't come with applause or validation or proof that you made the right choice. It doesn't show up in sales figures or chart positions or award shows. It lives in the small, private moments when no one is watching and you decide who you want to be anyway. Jackson had made his decision in a dim studio with bad blinds and a cassette tape he didn't take. No one wrote about it, no one knew it had happened. It wasn't a headline or a story or a lesson anyone could point to. It didn't make him look noble or wise or brave. It was just a moment. One choice. One door he didn't walk through. But years later, when people talked about Jackson Browne, they didn't talk about the hits he chased. They talked about the honesty, the vulnerability, the way his songs felt like they were written in real time, in real pain, in real hope. They talked about the way his music aged well, the way it stayed relevant not because it followed trends, but because it ignored them. They talked about the way he never pretended to have answers. And maybe that was because he'd learned, somewhere along the way, that saying no to the wrong thing was just as important as saying yes to the right one. Maybe it was because he'd figured out that you can't build a career on someone else's vision, no matter how good that vision is. Maybe it was because he'd felt the weight of compromise and decided it was heavier than the weight of uncertainty. The artist who recorded the song went on to have a career, a good one. They made more music, played more shows, built a life around the thing they'd been given. They had other hits, some almost as big, some smaller. They dealt with their own pressures, their own questions, their own moments of doubt. Jackson never resented them for it. How could he? They'd done what he couldn't. They'd taken something that didn't belong to him and made it theirs. They'd sung it with belief, with hunger, with the kind of conviction that can't be faked. That was the way it was supposed to work. But sometimes, late at night, when Jackson was alone in a hotel room or a tour bus or a silent house, he'd think about that song. He'd think about the cassette tape and the dim studio and the songwriter's face when he said no. He'd think about the parallel life he didn't live, the version of himself that said yes and rode the wave and became someone different. He'd think about the weight of that decision and the lightness that came after. Because the truth was, saying no had cost him something. It had cost him a hit. It had cost him momentum. It had cost him certainty. It had cost him the easy story, the one where he made the smart choice and everyone agreed and everything worked out. But it had also given him something. It had given him the quiet knowledge that he could walk away, that he could choose himself, even when it was hard, that he could trust the voice inside him that said, "This isn't yours," even when everyone else was saying, "Take it," even when taking it would have been easier, safer, smarter. And maybe that was worth more than a hit song. Or maybe it wasn't. Maybe it didn't have to be worth anything at all. Maybe it just had to be true. Years later, someone asked Jackson about that time in his career, about the choices he made, about the songs he didn't record. They were sitting in a cafe, rain coming down outside, the kind of gray afternoon that makes everything feel a little more honest. He didn't name the song. He didn't tell the whole story. He didn't explain about the cassette tape or the studio or the way the silence felt after the songwriter left. He just said, "You can't sing something you don't believe, not for long, not without losing yourself." And the person asking nodded like they understood. But Jackson wasn't sure they did. Because the thing about staying true to yourself is that it doesn't feel like wisdom in the moment. It feels like fear. It feels like walking away from something you might never get again. It feels like watching the train leave the station while you stand on the platform, wondering if you just made the biggest mistake of your life. It feels like watching someone else take what you turned down and turning it into everything you said you didn't want, and then realizing, slowly, painfully, quietly, that you were right, not because you were smarter, not because you were better, not because you saw something no one else could see, but because you were you. And sometimes, that's the only thing you get to keep. The song still plays on the radio sometimes, not as often as it used to, but enough. Enough that every few years someone discovers it again and remembers why they loved it. Enough that it shows up in movies and commercials and playlists titled classic hits or songs that defined a generation. Jackson hears it when it comes on. He doesn't change the station anymore. He doesn't tense up or wonder what might have been. He listens. He nods. He recognizes the craft, the hook, the way it moves. He remembers the room, the cassette, the choice. And then he keeps driving. Because the road doesn't end when you say no. It doesn't stop or reverse or punish you for choosing differently. It just goes a different way. And sometimes, if you're lucky, if you're brave, if you're willing to live with the not knowing, that different way leads you home. Not to a place, not to a moment, not to success or failure or vindication, but to yourself, the person you were trying to be all along. The one who knew, even when no one else did, what belonged to you and what didn't. The one who let the wrong song go so the right ones could stay. The one who understood that sometimes the most important thing you can do is walk away from something good so you can find something true. And in the end, in the quiet moments when the noise fades and the questions stop, that's what Jackson Browne was left with. Not a hit song, not a moment of glory, not the satisfaction of being right, just the steady, quiet knowledge that he'd chosen himself. And that was enough.